And we're live, we're live to all of our people on our Facebook audience. Good morning to you, Vernon. How are you doing, brother?
Never better. I feel more youthful than ever before. How are you?
That's because you're pure youth. Some of us principal youth, you have to understand, it's just catching up with us, and it's never friendly, Vernon. It's never friendly. Mm.
Absolutely.
When
Absolutely.
you when you get to being principal youth, you'll you'll understand. So yes, today we're gonna go through a few stories. That being the main thing we're gonna be going through today is market data. We will be going through two sets of results. We will touch on the rest tomorrow. I will be doing and good morning to you, Priscilla Zulu, who has joined us on the as part of our audience, who has given us a good morning greeting, Vernon. Very good morning greeting. But we will be going through, as I said, market data. We'll be going through some of the main news stories that came out on our five things to know. We'll also be going through market results, and I'll be specifically touching on Puma Energy, on Puma Energy, Zambru, and what's it called? And Zambia Reinsurance. And finally, we will also be touching on Zambia Reinsurance. And finally, we will also be touching on the final part of yesterday's conversation, where we were talking about wealth succession. Succession being such a huge conversation, and it is starting to attract a bit of interest in our markets, but and from our people. However, Vernon, kickoff. Zambian kwacha has not stopped going down. And it is continuing this horrendous slide, unfortunately, which is terrifying the majority of the markets. But we are still, and it is still scaring quite a number of people, especially those that have to deal with import products or the fact that energy prices seem to not be able to stop going into the higher ranks. So I'm just telling everybody, you have to kind of condition your mind to understand that as long as the exchange rate keeps moving the way it does, energy prices are set to keep moving in the opposite direction of 4% a month, unless we get the speed up of the cleaning of the pipe. That's got to do with diesel. I know that there were some stories talking about reverting back to a quarterly review. The Minister of Energy quickly defunked that, and he just said, no, that is not what I said. And he clearly stated it. Unfortunately, when it comes to certain reporting on these issues, they sometimes does seem to be a slack approach. Because even in the article, we use a lot of, unfortunately in Zambia, we use a lot of clickbait headlines, and that's the unfortunate standard. We don't say what it is to help people gather. This is why I always try and give data and statistics as your top line. That's what you're
But then
supposed to give, not
I'm
give
sorry
people
to cut
shock
you
and awe.
short, Twale. This continued, decrease of, value of the kwacha. Where are we going really? I'm hoping we could possibly find a situation where we have the strength of the kwacha. Why are you doing this?
Until the debt gets resolved, don't put your hopes in it. Okay? I'm just telling you guys this right now. The only hope is if the mining sector can start to inject huge amounts of capital back in the system. There is a little bit of hope because we are seeing growth in exports. There's some slight bit of hope because we are starting to import. We're starting to see growth in exports, especially copper exports, and we did see it bounce back to the $700 million. But we are still seeing huge amounts of demand from the medical sector for dollars. We're still seeing huge amounts of demand. Remember, we've got fertilizer prices that are still up, but they're starting to slow down. So the only thing that is making this a little bit better is that the trajectory of food prices that are causing prices to be up is slowing down. Inflated cost of things coming out of China is down. South Africa, the currency is also staying weak, though it is starting to strengthen a bit against us. That's also working in our negative. The rand went up 1.39% yesterday. So remember that we have to import from South Africa, but inflation of manufactured goods in South Africa is still not moving very rampantly. Those are the only things. Global food prices might also start to slow down and pull back. Now, what might help is that our export products might start to circumvent that, in that when our currency is sitting here, exported agricultural goods and all sorts of things might improve. But however, Vernon, on the other side of 60 at 60, we will go into my deeper view on maybe where it comes from, but what I'm really placing my views on right now of where the FX rate is going to continue going.
All right.
Thank you very much, Vernon. And thank you for bringing us back. For those who were catching up with 60 at 60, that is our every hour news review. So you are asking on the other side about where the kwacha is going. Unfortunately, this is like trying to catch a falling knife. That is what the old saying is. So it's the problem is the expectations of weakening are baked into the equation. So the central bank has reacted by increasing interest rates. The central bank has reacted by trying to thin out the what's it called the reserve ratios, to try and make sure that banks don't have any. There's no one who can try and speculate against the currency in hopes that they can try and make some money off it. So here's my concern. This may trigger the central bank to take an aggressive stance, because if it continues going down this direction, we're looking at about 24.79 by the end of July. That's where we're looking at. We're looking at 20.88 by the end of this month, 21.84 by the end of April, and then going all the way up to June, 23.79, end of July, 24.79. So that's what I always do, a 4-month outlook of where the direction is currently taking us, and that's where we're going. So if we don't stop, but unfortunately, like I said, the momentum has continued. The currency is now moving on momentum. This is 110 straight days of currency devaluation, and it is currently moving on nothing but momentum. So this is going to keep driving pump prices up by about 4% on a monthly basis, unless we restructure the fuel supply chain. So that's one problem that they're trying to fix. We're supposed to be talking about blending of fuel. We're supposed to be talking about improving of. We're supposed to be talking about blending fuel with ethanol within. I don't know. I think it was the next 2 months or so, or 3 months. Then we're also supposed to be talking about the diesel pipeline, which is supposed to be finished being cleaned sometime soon. So therefore, these are the two hurdles right now in trying to restructure the cost. because remember that fuel is one of our biggest demands for dollars, but there's still pharmaceuticals and food, and pharmaceuticals and fertilizer. Those two also cause quite a substantial problem when it comes to the FX rate. However, fertilizer prices are finally starting to come down. In the last few months, we've seen it on the global market in dollars, while we're seeing pharmaceutical costs are still extremely high because the pandemic did fight off pharmaceutical supply chains and make pharmaceutical supplies pharmaceuticals were in short supply due to the pandemic. So therefore, inflation in the pharmaceutical sector has been a problem for the market. So these areas, it's not ending anytime soon, unless we see a conclusion to the debt. Unless we see a conclusion to the debt, it's not ending anytime soon. And the way this currency is moving, it's really being brutal. This is as bad as that last. In fact, it's almost worse than that last one we had, where we ended up getting close to 22. Now, looking at the bond markets, bonds are down, up 0.2% on the bond index. We have seen that year to date it's up 5.9%, just above where we were, trying to keep up where we are with inflation. In terms of for US dollar holders, now this is mainly institutional who have got bad rap on this one, down 0.13%, down 5.7%. So you can see that bonds are splitting the 11%. The 12.229% growth of the dollar this year. Obviously, interest rates on bonds have still held the same. But in the commodity market yesterday, we did see that copper was down 0.14%. Oil was down 6.38% from where we were at the end of last week on Friday. Now, we did see that mainly this is because of a huge US drawdown, but there is some optimism that will push oil down. It is currently trading at 77.5. Okay, so you have to bear in mind, and we're probably going to give you the mid-month reviews of what we expect the oil price to be. If we're looking at the trends on the global oil price, and if we're looking at the trends on the FX rate itself, those two things will give us what our expectation of the oil price would be. Though, Vernon, I am still looking at something that is telling me that we might be seeing an oil price somewhere to the tune of 29.3. That is the expected oil price that we're probably going to see at the end of coming in at the end of March, going into April. So please prep yourselves, or as some would say, check yourself before you wreck yourself. But this is literally where we are. We probably might be looking at another 78 where upward movement. Currently, that's where the trends are taking us. 2.79% increase in the pump price. Right now, only because of lower prices of fuel. Global Brent prices on average are down 0.29%, but the kwacha is already up 3.56% from where it was last month. So we're already having a problem again with how the kwacha is performing versus where it was last month. So that's the battle that we will be seeing. And so expect your pump prices probably up 2.7 to about 3%. In the following month. And again, just keep ramping that into your transportation costs every single month until we start to see some changes, unless we see structural changes that have been mentioned. Yeah.
With fuel pump prices, I remember last time we tried to have, what do you call it? Energy analysts from the Energy Regulation Board really just giving us and why they resorted to the monthly review of pump prices. Which one do you think is more sustainable, to have a review every single month, or maybe in a space of a quarter or so? Which one do you think is more sustainable between the two methods?
Well, the problem is that it's the battle is between your companies and your consumers. Your companies want to profit. Okay, they're not philanthropies. I keep telling you people this. So your companies, when they see the global oil price go up and they can see pressure picking up on the market, their instinct is to hold back supply with the expectation that the price is going to go up. So I want to ask you a simple question, Bernard. If you know that if you have tomatoes, and let's assume tomatoes can last forever. Let's assume that, because someone I know is going to answer, but tomatoes, let's assume tomatoes can last forever. Okay. So in that regard, if tomatoes can last forever, Vernon, and I tell you that the price of a tomato is going to be double what it is, or more than 10%, or at least 20% what it is today in 2 weeks' time, will you sell it today or will you sell it in 2 weeks' time? Okay. you'll sell it in 2 weeks' time, right? I
Yeah.
don't know if
Yes,
you, yeah.
definitely.
So
It's different as compared to a different kind of commodity, but tomato definitely will not last very long.
no, but let's assume,
Fuel, at least you can hold it.
let's assume it can last. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Let's
Right.
assume it can last. If it could last, okay, or let's say sneakers, Vernon. Let's change it to sneakers. Let's say you're selling
Right.
sneakers, and I tell you that the price of the sneakers you're selling, Vernon, are probably going to go up by 25% in the next month. Will you sell them now or will you sell them later?
I'll wait until I can have more value on them.
Exactly. You see, this is what Milton Friedman meant when he talked about inflation. He said the funny thing about inflation is that we want the things that we buy to go down, but we want the things that we sell to go up. Okay. Everybody wants the price of the things they sell to go up, including the petrol companies. Okay. And I'm going to show you the results of one of our listed companies just to show you how these things are actually working for them. Okay. And working in their favor. But the reality is, they will push for that. So my problem with the quarterly review is always going to be this: if the fuel prices start pushing upwards, and the petroleum companies feel that they could make more money selling it later, what do they start doing? Holding back stock. What do you start facing? Shortages. And then we go from crying about the price of fuel to crying that there is no fuel. And the reality, Vernon, is what would you rather have? A 3% price hike on your fuel or no fuel? Which one would you pick? Okay. And I'm telling
Unless
you,
you
you
have the
won't
supply,
pick.
even it's expensive.
Exactly. Exactly. You'd rather have the supply, even though it's expensive, okay, rather than not having fuel. Because once there's no fuel, that means your life comes to a crashing halt. Okay, you can't move, you can't do anything. When there's no mobility around, these are the issues. But rising prices is affecting things. Rising fuel prices is affecting the bus driving industry because bus drivers are opting not to come to work, or they're not reporting onto the road, and therefore clogging up, also slowing down transit. So there are some issues that we are facing in the economy, but I'm just telling you there are two of their worst problems here. If you continue, and I ask you people this, we were doing the quarterly reviews and the semi-annual reviews, and the government was stepping in and subsidizing. What were we facing? The pump price said 17, but when you got to the fuel station, you wasn't getting any 17 kwacha oil because there was no oil. Okay, that was the issue you were facing with. So we faced this issue before. That's what I keep telling people. The subsidy policy looks nice, feels nice, but does not work because the petrol companies will just lash back against you and say, yeah, sure, we're not putting this stuff on the market. We're going to wait for you to raise the prices when you realize how expensive this stuff is because you don't have the sustainability to keep this price low. So they're going to play you out on it. Okay. And that's where the issues are starting to lie. Now, these companies can't wait you out, they can smoke you out. And that's where you will start to complain as the consumer, saying we're having fuel shortages. Because 2020, Vernon, 2021, was that not what we were complaining about as a country? Consistent and persistent fuel
Yeah.
shortages. Where do you think they were coming from? They were coming from the fact that petrol companies were thinking that this stuff is underpriced. So we're not putting it on the market until you give us the right price. Okay? That is what that's what plays out, unfortunately, negatively. So the monthly review, yes, there'll be shortages, but have you noticed the shortages are just that week before the announcement, whenever the price is about to go up? It's no longer a month before. You know, where you start hearing stories like in Chipata, they haven't had fuel for a month. You know, we're not having that problem anymore. We're waiting for 8 straight days. We're not getting that. We're just getting that couple of days just before the announcement, where they pull off a little bit of the supply and just wait to start putting it on, or they slow down how much supply they're putting on the market. So yes, they're still playing their doozy do games with us, but that's the reality. But it's less painful because they know that every month they're going to get a fair price adjustment on their fuel. So yeah, that's why I would go with the monthly adjustment, mainly because of that. Yes, because we're exposed to it. However, then whenever let's say the price of oil starts coming down, okay, and then we're on a 3-month adjustment. Are we not the same people who are going to turn around and say, no, but the price of fuel in the global market is coming down? Why isn't it being adjusted? Aren't we not the same people who say that? So we want a 3-month adjustment when the price is going up, but we want a monthly adjustment when the price is going down. That's what we want. You see, unfortunately, these are the tough things that we have to face as people. We have to try and fix the supply chain. This is why I keep saying, guys, in the long run, maybe let's switch to electric cars and beef up our electric industry. Then you start getting, no, we don't want. It's not going to happen. You got all this chatter. But that's what would save you from all of this, because that's the energy Zambia produces. We don't have stockpiles of oil. Okay, we're not an oil producing country, and maybe when we get that 2026 pipeline with Angola doing better, maybe that will start to get better. I know there are talks about a pipeline with Zimbabwe, but those are talks, people. Until there's pen to paper and things are actually moving, those are talks. Okay, and I'm sorry, people, but I always say trust talks at your own peril. Now, the other part of the equation that we're looking at also is gold went up yesterday. Gold in dollars went up 2.2% on the premise that U.S. inflation was starting to rise. We did see that in terms of your wealth insurance assets, okay, your potential wealth insurance assets. We did see yesterday that gold was up 2.25% in Kwacha, up 17.34%. So it's performing much better than dollar because of the USD movement of gold itself. We did see that Ethereum and Bitcoin up 21.19% from the previous day, and Ethereum up 18% on the premise that people are starting to bet that the Federal Reserve is going to be a bit less hawkish when they're seeing that this Signature Bank and with all the issues with Signature Bank, SBV, and also the other one, I can't remember, Silvergate Bank. Now, here's the issue, okay? Silvergate, Signature, and SBV were the three most cryptocurrency-friendly banks, okay? Because a lot of the venture capital money in America was going towards cryptocurrency projects or blockchain-related projects, and the central bank and the banking system has still not yet been comfortable with this Wild West wealth creating thing that happens on the side without Wall Street's approval. So obviously, when it comes to regulation, where they're saying we may not support some of these banks, Signature Bank, the crypto industry does feel that Signature Bank was targeted because of this issue. Silvergate was targeted, that these banks are being targeted because they're too cryptocurrency friendly. So that's a risk. Regulatory risk might start creeping in. But then again, the cryptocurrency industry has also been packed full of conspiracy theorists half the time who are also always angry. It's a mix, okay? It's a mix. You take it with a pinch of salt. The regulators are not always happy with cryptocurrency because they're always trying to protect the status quo. Okay, regulators always tend to protect the cows that give them the most milk, which are the current incumbents. You see it here with our sectors, whether it's banking, whether it's insurance, whatever it is. Our regulators have a tendency to protect those who are already there because they make their most money off of them. However, you also see that the cryptocurrency likes lobbing accusations very quickly. And look, cryptocurrency was built on conspiracy. It was built, or let me not say conspiracy, but it was built on anti-system thought. Okay, it was built that the system is rigged. We're building this thing to lash back against it. So it's always going to be against the system. Now, taking a look also at some of the major stories globally. One, if Indian inflation in food is rising, but ex-food inflation is falling. So we're seeing mixed signals in India. The food sector is the one where there's majority of inflation. Spanish CPIs rise but lower than expected. US CPIs did drop to 6%, but core CPIs monthly did start to accelerate. So there's a little bit of a risk, and inflation is looking sticky in America, which is also driving that the Federal Reserve may keep interest rates up. If the Federal Reserve starts to become more dovish and starts to pull down interest rates, more capital gets released back into the system, more bond yield hunters start coming in, and then that can start reversing our currency if they start coming into Zambia. But remember, the number one thing keeping bond investors out of Zambia is the debt situation. Until that is dealt with, your yield hunters want nothing to do with Zambia, or they've got limited exposure that they want to deal with Zambia for when it comes to USD. The US, as we said also yesterday, we saw that 1.5 million barrels increase in US oil inventories, putting pressure on reducing prices of oil itself. But however, the biggest news, which will probably push oil prices upwards, is that OPEC upgraded its outlook for Chinese demand. That is probably going to push prices upwards. Now, looking at also interest spectrum, China is also making more investments in fixed income assets. The property sector of China did grow a bit higher, but but it did grow by 5.5%. And Asian stocks are signaling, obviously, that the bank route is that the Federal Reserve will probably be a bit less hawkish. Now, we're also seeing yesterday that we saw Italian production did slow down. So we did see a slowdown from the industrial sector, but higher property product. Chinese industrial production jumps higher than expected, but it jumps higher, but the rise was lower than expected. The Chinese property sector, unfortunately, fell to the slowest pace for the first time in 2 months of 2023. Wow. Coal production, this is interesting. Coal production in China rose by 5.8% in the first 2 months of 2023 for the same period of the year of 2022. So it appears that China has resorted in their earnings to try and become more green friendly. They've said, forget it. We're just going to go back to coal. So they've started pumping out more coal. UK earnings rose, but at a slower pace than expected. However, unemployment did stay at about 3.7% due to an unexpected job bump of about 50,000 jobs created. US optimism of small businesses is rising. However, the Red Book, in terms of the retail sector, has slowed down its growth to 2.6%. And Chinese retail sales unexpectedly bounced back, but Chinese unemployment did rise slightly. So you're getting mixed feeds towards the positive in growth. You're getting industrial data, which is showing a bit more slow data. You're getting interest rate data, which might show that we might get improvements in lowering and more capital availability. But inflation is still at risk, mainly due to OPEC's upgrade of Chinese outlook. Everything else is showing that inflation should be slowing down, but energy inflation might start picking up. So that, Vernon, is our four horsemen outlook when it comes to the market that we should be watching for energy inflation risk. Now, some of the main stories before we get into the big conversations today is yesterday we did see that the 2022 Zambia Bribe Payers Index did reveal that Zambian police, lands ministry, roads and RTSA and ZESCO are some public institutions with probability of experiencing a bribe. In other words, that these are the more, it's like you're telling people where to go if they want to get shortcuts. This may have the wrong effect you're thinking, because you're thinking these are the most likely. So now people are thinking, also, that's where I can get service if I just throw some money down on the table. It's not like the people of this country are not as corrupt as you may think. But yes, the 2022 Bribe Payers Index had indicated a reduction in bribes by public officers. The index also revealed that Ministry of Health received the highest number of bribes in 2022, followed by the RDA, Zambia Police, RDA, while Zambia Police Traffic Section has shown a decrease in bribes and corruption, mainly because obviously the different payments. And the secretary to the cabinet, Patrick Congo, did say the decrease is a manifestation of the efforts of the government to put in place such a rollout of integrity committee in both government and private institutions. I don't know if committees resolve things. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if committees tend to resolve, because the committees themselves half the time are as problematic as the thing they're trying to solve. And responding to this presentation of the Bribe Payers Index, the Anti-Corruption Commission board chairperson said the impediments affecting the fight against corruption is the fear to report cases to the relevant officers. Plus, let me tell you where bribes come from. Okay? One, bribes come from the fact that the system is often inefficient. People pay for things to speed up because there's a lot of inefficiency. And until we digitize properly, okay, and we start to allow for a lot more transparency through digitization and also just making things more efficient, compliance starts becoming an issue. Think about the way people are making payments for a lot of these services that we used to. Because they're easier to do, people tend to just comply with them much easier without having to go to someone to get bribes and everything. So speed up processes. If you sped up the processes, less people would need to be bribed. Okay, I know I'm using the word need to be, because no one really needs to be bribed, especially in a Christian nation, people, especially in a Christian nation. But the reality is, this is a culture. bribery and corruption, unfortunately, has become a culture of this country, mainly driven by inefficiency. So, if the government works on the efficiency of its processes and also decentralizing some of its processes, the likelihood is you can find that you're dealing with less bribes, and then you can start to attack them more with policing power. So I'm sure we can see this as we progress in rolling out more digital payment platforms and things on the government bus. And also, Vernon, when there's no interaction between a person at an office and they're just making a payment online with their phone, they are less likely to have to bribe someone. So that's what I keep saying. Make these things faster, make them easier, and you are less likely. If you want to start seeing more vehicles on the road, for example, paying with proper fitness and everything, I've always said this, Vernon, decentralize the fitness testing of cars to the fitment centers. Okay, allow the RTSA to now just oversee the certificates and allow the fitment centers to actually give you your certificate by just keeping up your fitness book, okay, or your service book. And therefore, they can do that and then have the RTSA inspect the fitness centers. You know what I see? Why I see that happening? One, more people are probably going to have their cars fixed properly. But two, what you're probably going to find is that now there are also going to be more job creation because fitment centers are going to have to hire people, because Zambia has Zambia, in terms of active vehicles on the road, this country has got about 800,000 to 900,000 of a vehicle fleet in this country. Okay. So if you have 800, 900,000 cars that are now being tested in fitment centers, as opposed to people who are just dodging and ducking because they don't have the time to be standing in the queues, if you give that to the fitment centers, more employment. And which employment, Vernon? Low income or low education, hand-based hand-based skill employment, the kind of employment we're trying to give into this country. Okay, so that may be where you can get rid of. And yes, there is private sector corruption.
Speaking about decentralization of systems and how this process can actually be made easier, for people to really access and have whatever product or service that they're looking for. I don't know, having interactions with other peers. Just yesterday, one of course was complaining, lamentably saying, I have had been at this particular location at a government institution trying to acquire something, and we've been here since morning, and our documents have not even been touched for processing. And this is almost 4 p.m. and these people actually do not off at 5 p.m. Speaking about, digitizing and whatnot, I understand that of course the government is trying to evolve with times, but then seeing at the pace at which we're moving, and of course people, from what I've actually seen, the government seems to be finding the whole digitization process a bit too expensive for them to really just synchronize with the already existing system of doing things. So I don't know really if we're going to find ourselves in a place where our systems have been digitized, and of course that should help us with regards to efficiency, proficiency, and service delivery, all of it together. Because already the little advancements we've made with technology in some of these government systems, there are just but a lot of glitches and inefficiency with regards to online payments, online registrations. It is already proving to be problematic. But then migrating entirely digitally, I don't see the future really to be working. I don't know, maybe we need to do a lot of trainings for our individuals in these offices for them to really grapple how this thing works. But really it is proving to be problematic to really work around with the digital aspect. And of course, with issues of corruption has it's a part of us. As much as one want to claim to be a Christian nation, I think corruption has always been in the face of Zambia. I mean, for the longest time possible. And the face-to-face interaction, of course, is precipitating the whole scenario of corruption. But then, in view of just the integrity committees to really end this, I spoke to some officials and they were saying, well, the public should reduce engaging on these bottlenecks. But then if you have an integrity committee and you put up policies around this government wing you're overseeing, I think it is but part of your duty. I don't know why I don't know if you want to call it reluctancy on making sure that these bottlenecks are out of the picture, but I feel they are allowed, like you're not doing about it. Indirectly, you're allowing it.
So if you want to slow down corruption, Vernon, and I get what you're saying, the systems are not perfect yet, but that's the nature of new systems. There's going to be some friction at the beginning, and there's going to be some all technological systems when deployed always have problems at the beginning. Okay, so hopefully they're being worked on. My only issue is the it's the services where there's technology but there's human interface. Okay, those humans used to live off bribes. They have no incentive to make that thing work. Zero. So you have to resort to automation as much as possible. Online automation. Yes, those platforms may not work as well, but online and automation. Now, it depends. The only problem is that whenever a tender goes through to the government to try and do something, there's always going to be an issue. Okay, there's always going to be an issue. Someone's going to try and inflate the cost, everything. It's the process of the process itself, which is even corrupted. Like, this is how deep corruption is in Zambia. Like, even tendering for a system to reduce corruption will in itself have corruption. Like, that's how bad the system is. Okay, and this is how deeply entrenched into the bones of this country that this problem has become. But automation is one of the issues that does help reduce the human impact, the human interaction. And yes, an integrity committee can sit there and just have meetings and write papers, but they're not going to be able to go office to office and actually stop the behavior of people. The best thing you can do is just take as much transactions out of the hands of the people. Let me give you an example. Okay, you've said to traffic officers that payments will now be done here. Okay, one of the best things you want to do, you want to stop people from what's it, bribing at the traffic lights. You don't want to stop people from doing that. Well, mount up the cameras like the same way they do in China, where they just scan your car and they just send you an SMS that you're moving without fitness. Okay, there's no need for somebody to stand on the road. Okay, those are the things you do. If you start introducing technology to start doing the work itself, especially in some of these areas, yes, it'll be replacing some human beings, but they're not supposed to be making money off that stuff anyway. Right? They're not supposed to be making money off that stuff anyway. So the easiest thing we can do is introduce as much technology that is automated. Automation, and then systemizing that automation is what exactly will try and fight this to a main degree, because the majority of bribing is usually to speed up a process or to get out of a problem. Those are the two issues where people are bribing the most. They're trying to speed up a process or to get out of a problem. Then you're maybe getting the odd bribe or two here where people are trying to get an opportunity into their hands, but it's usually a process and a problem. So if you want to try and get rid of these bribes, turn the processes and the problems into something that is handled by an online system. And therefore, there's less human interaction and human intervention and less opportunity to execute a bribe or receive a bribe. Those are some of the things that we have to do. And that's why even President Harris, Vice President Harris coming here to help speed up digitization and investments in digitization, these are the things that would actually help. If they can, if they're pledges, especially by these foreign governments, not just for money, but also for skills, to try and help our systems, our digital developers or our systems managers for our government to try and speed up their digitization process and integration with our mobile money systems, that would be probably better. Let me give you a simple example, Bernard. When it comes to China, you know that if you cross the road in China illegally, like if you do jaywalking, there's a camera that scans your face, knows your face, and you get a notice that you jaywalked like a few minutes later, and the money is just taken straight out of your mobile money account, like right on the spot. No need to go to court, no nothing. They just take it straight from your account, and then they put you on the naughty list. Like your name is even shown in public, where this one is jaywalked. Okay, so there's social scores. Like that's what the Chinese people live under in some of their cities. And that's how they're sorting out crime. Because why? They've got 1.6 billion people. They don't have the time to start going person by person trying to sort out your behavior. So technology is what Zambia must embrace. It's going to take time to transition from human interaction to technology. But the more we digitize and automate things, the more we digitize, decentralize, and democratize things, especially government services, the more we do those three things, the better the system can operate, because that is where society is. Now, we must not also forget that humans in society, it's not just government who's corrupt, it's the people who are also corrupt. Okay? There's corruption happening also with people. It's not just government. So there's a social corruption and a moral corruption that is taking place, which is far deeper than just the government itself. But these are the realities, Ben. These are the realities of the country that we live in, and it's going to take time to kind of reduce this and work it out. It's not going to be something that can be hit. Cultural change takes some time. Um, now, quickly going into that was just one of the main stories, but quickly going into results that came out or that came out over the last week, we'll touch into three companies' results. The first one, which we have in terms of company results that came out yesterday or that came out during this period, is Puma Energy was the first one we had. Puma Energy revenue, Puma Energy being the oil marketing company, their revenues are up 49.25%. You heard me, Vernon. 49.25%. See what happens when oil prices go up? You start to see these OMCs start doing very well in their books. They also did experience a 9% increase in volumes as well. So it was a 9% increase in volumes, but a drastic jump in prices, which led to the OMCs like Puma Energy going up. In fact, if we want to give a direct look as to where prices have gone from the end of 2020, because we're trying to look at from the end of 2022 to the beginning of where we are. So from the end of 2022, we had oil prices or crude oil prices closing at a price of 80. Sorry, just trying to pull up the data here. But we had crude oil prices closing on a price of 85.9, but where they were the year before when they closed the market in terms of crude oil prices themselves were up a little bit higher than that throughout the period. But in terms of the pump price, so I just want to grab that information. Remember that our pump price at the end of the year was sitting in the 20s. So remember that with these oil marketing companies, and I think this is what we all need to understand, where the pump price sits versus when they bought the oil is what wins them the game. Okay, if they bought the oil cheap at a previous time, but the pump price was lower, you will find that the pump, if they bought the oil cheap. So, for example, pump prices in the year have risen 22%. Okay. So remember that's what they've experienced. So as pump prices keep rising, they're able to then source their oils cheaper because they're getting finished products. So it depends on them. So they've had a 9% increase in volumes while also having a pump price. Now, one of the most difficult things for a company like Puma Energy is that Zambia's car fleet growth has been moving at a much slower pace than it has been in previous times. So they would be hoping that the increased and remember that 49% of of their fuel demand comes from the retail sector. So they're always relying on the growth of the retail sector to give them a much higher revenue. But unfortunately, they're still struggling on that. The retail sector has been growing at a much slower pace. And one of the other big news that we did see for Puma Energy throughout the end of last year, throughout the process of last year, is that they are also trying to reposition themselves to be selling LPG gas. So remember, that's also one of their biggest things. Also, they're trying to push into the LPG gas business to try and diversify their income streams. So this is why, one, I think they did benefit very well from oil prices going up and pump prices going up. So I just want to pull up a little bit of data when I talked about the LPG gas decision from Puma Energy. Remember, I gave us this presentation just a while back to start looking at what they're looking at. And my first pickup point, which I wanted us to all look at, was the growth of the car fleet. So this is Zambia's national car fleet, according to RTSA statistics, which shows that Zambia's national car fleet throughout the period of 2006 all the way up to 2021 has grown up to 899,000 cars that are operating in Zambia. But if you're looking at the growth, the annual growth of cars, we have gone from 25% growth of cars annually down to 5% of growth. We're down at 5.3% growth of the national car fleet. And remember that when it comes to Puma, if you're looking at their business model, you have seen that the petrol sector has been the petrol sector that they're selling mainly to the retail consumer is only growing at about 5.7%. and the diesel sector. So this is petroleum products altogether. Sorry, not Puma specifically, but this is petroleum products. And then Puma Energy is also dealing with a highly more competitive market. Remember, they used to be number one, but they've been whacked off the top by Total, and then Mount Meru is basically gunning at them and has taken them out. So they're now at number three. So the main growth that they have been trying to stir up is their retail sector. So they have been facing slow growth. So on this backdrop, for Puma to register a 49% rise in revenue is quite shocking, because it wasn't the expectation for revenues to be that high for the company. Now, in addition, we did see also profits of Puma went up by, hold your breath, Vernon, 168%. So not only did they have higher profits, not only did they have higher revenue, they had profits that grew from 80 million to 235 million. Now, remember, the thing about Puma is they're a very small margin business because of how many costs operate in there. But one of the things I am seeing in terms of them as a stock is that you're actually seeing that their PE ratio has dropped. The share price has gone up by 1 point, and the PE ratio has dropped from 9 to 3.89. So this stock is underpriced. So for me, this is actually a fair price stock, and it's a strong buy, mainly because one, it's fair price, they're generating good revenue, they're diversifying into LPG gas because they're buying gas for $3 million, and also they've invested 62 million kwacha into their retail network. So it does speak to the fact that we are looking at a buy of a stock. Other stocks that did report yesterday, we did analyze the data from: Zambia Breweries, revenue up 19.37%. We did see that profit before tax for Zambia Breweries was up. But profit after tax was down, unfortunately, due to tax concessions that changed. But we did see profit before tax up 33.84%. Unfortunately, profits before. But in terms of operating profits, they're up 54%, and gross profits are up 30%. We're seeing the margins improving. Gross profit margins for Zambia Breweries went up, while net profit margins did decline, mainly because of the change in profitability. But when you're looking at when you're looking now with Zambia Breweries at their PE ratio, one of the problems that we are starting to find with Zambia Breweries is that their PE ratio is currently sitting somewhere around at over 30. Now, the price to earnings ratio, meaning the price of the stock on the stock market versus the price of the earnings per share, it should be less than 7-1. That is the ratio that I put out regularly. It should be less than 7-1, really 6.5-1. This one is currently at a ratio of almost 35-1. That means that this stock is wildly overpriced. And that's where the problems, I think, are coming from for Zambia Breweries as a stock and as a company. Now, for me, my main concern for it is that, yes, they're trying to invest $80 million in doubling their capacity. That is currently what they're working on. Yes, they're currently digitizing their system. That's another thing that we're seeing also. Zambia Breweries is currently working on digitizing its system to change, to try and help its distribution. They've got something called the Kuja Distributor Management System, which they've been working on to try and improve to start their online strategy, and they are working on that. And due to that, they're hoping to then expand their network and reduce their distribution costs. That's the main outlook of Zambia Breweries. But my problem is they are still wild. It's the share price of the company, the cost at which you have to buy the stock right now of 7 kwacha, which has made this a stock that is much less attractive than it should be. I would say this, Vernon, Zambia Brewery stock is a lot like a growing child, okay, that is 7 years old. You know they're going to grow, but they are wearing a 15-year-old's clothing. So imagine a 7-year-old in 15-year-old clothes. It's going to take time before they can fit into that clothing. Okay, that's where the problem is. So it's going to take time before Zambia Breweries can fit into the share price that it has. but it has been seeing some of the better performing margins that it has was imported products such as cans were doing good. While they also did see the launch of the Brutal Fruit Ruby Apple Spritzer in November, they were also dealing with that. That also helped them out. But they were facing higher costs of electricity coupled with price volatility impacted by direct costs, reinstatement of VAT on petroleum. So these are the things that made stuff harder for their logistics pipeline. But they did say that as a company, Zambia breweries contributed. This is why the liquor companies are always going to stay alive with it. They contributed 1.16 billion kwacha in excise tax to government coffers. That's why we're not going to deal with alcohol anytime soon. We'll talk a big game about alcohol, but the government is dependent on that stuff for taxing. Just remember that altogether. Operating profits were up, but unfortunately net profits. But they are making huge investments, as they talked about, in their Mungwi Road capacity to try, and that'll be done by 2023. And it will also enable them to make cassava-based products in Lusaka that are currently only produced in Dola. So they're also trying to make any cassava-based products, and they are optimistic about their future. But I am seeing, if I'm looking at Puma, I would say Puma is buy now. Zambia breweries, the only thing that makes me positive about them is the amount of capex spending they're doing, the digitization of their distribution. Those are the two main positives I would have for them. But the inputs of their products might start becoming problematic. But you are starting to see a lot of investment from companies like Zambeef, also in wheat production, to try and help with trying to curb the losses that are being made there. That is where I'll put those two. I'm gonna leave the stock analysis at them. I will be doing a review of where the market is. I've got what I call my market scoreboard. You still want to stay tuned for where we are looking at with the market scoreboard of what we're seeing in terms of results for most of the listed companies. And Vernon, it being the closing bell of today's show, I wanted to add on to yesterday's show. Uh, but before we do, obviously, I do want to give a shout out to Chakolwa United for continuing giving companies like Zambia Breweries growth in business, or giving them 20% increase in revenue. Well done, Chakolwa United. Well done. Which consists of 80% guys, and we know that, right? So one of the final steps I wanted to quickly look at today, Vernon, has to do with 5 components. So yesterday I talked about 5 principles of intergenerational wealth succession. Today I want to give you 5 components. And then I'm going to talk about it in business tomorrow. How do we talk about intergenerational succession in African or Zambian businesses, and how can we improve the transfer of businesses from one generation to another? But let's just talk about wealth. So yesterday I said you must be enlightened in that you must seek wise counsel to try and see who should be your successor, who should hold on to your estate, who was the one that should manage it, who should be the administrator. Because when you are departed, that is the only person who will be managing it. That's you, and you won't have any power to change or stop them, except maybe the instructions you leave to them. The second thing, obviously, is we talked about yesterday was financially educating your successor to manage your finances well that you leave to them. The next step we talked about was not just financially educating your successor, but also exposing them to you dealing with your stocks, your bonds, your properties, your assets, your dealings and your things, and also giving them experience managing the fund and also managing where your end point is. Today, I want to talk about what are the 5 components that a person who you're handing over your wealth to should inherit from you. Okay? So here are 5 things, and everybody, I wish you could just write these down. These are extremely important. The first one, Vernon, is a culture. Okay? A person who is taking over your business taking over your finances, must inherit your financial culture. If you have good finances that are leading to somebody having an inheritance from you, what are the beliefs and the behaviors that you've been practicing that led you there? And you must transmit those. And how do you do that? Observation. You should be teaching your children these things because your children are the best to learn. The best people, Vernon, who can learn are children, and they learn through observation. That's how the Jewish community have managed to do it. Because when a Jewish child is young, Vernon, they give them 5 jars and they tell them, for every 10 shekels or 10 kwacha, I'll say that I give you, 5 kwacha goes into your spending jar, 2 kwacha goes into your investment jar, 1 kwacha into your tithing jar, 1 kwacha into your charity jar, and 1 kwacha into your savings jar. This Jewish child is trained from the beginning to know that you separate money to purpose and then you manage it according to its separation. That is a cultural transfer. Okay, and it's done very effectively. And then we all ask ourselves, how come Jews are very rich? How come? Because they're trained to handle money and you are trained to spend money. Okay, you burn through money like it's going to rot. That's where the problem comes with our culture. So, what culture are you handing over? If you want intergenerational wealth, the question is, what culture are you handing over to your children? The second question is, what character are you handing over to your children? What disciplines? What behavioral traits? What personality? Do you know your money personality, Vernon? Have you done your money personality test? There's a Ramsey online money personality test. People do it. Know your Mayer-Briggs personality and what are the implications financially? Does that make you conservative? Everything. What personalities and strategies have you got? So, what are your characteristics when it comes to your managing of money? What risk preference? So, are they adopting that? So, make sure this person is also inheriting your financial character. So, there's your financial culture and there's your financial character. Then also your financial cause. Vernon, if you're saving and investing because you're saying, I want my family tree to no longer be the synonym of poverty. Yes, that did rhyme. Now, if you want that to be your life goal, then you need to make sure your children also adopt that as their life goal, that you want to make sure that you change your family tree to one which passes down wealth from one generation to another. And that is the overriding cause. Also, what is the social causes that you have? Do you believe in education and contributing to education? Have you given that cause to your children so that they can believe in it too? So are you giving them causes to aggressively look towards? So make sure they inherit your causes, your reasons, your meaning, your purpose. If they can inherit those things, they are most likely to, when they get component number 4, the cash. So before you hand over the cash and the assets to the kids, make sure they've adopted your culture, your character, and your cause. Then they can inherit the cash, because now they're going to then direct the cash under the cultural behaviors they practice, the characteristics they have, and a cause that is driving them. And they are less likely to squander the money, because remember, people, 70% of wealth is destroyed by the first generation, by the second generation, and 90% is destroyed by the third generation. So to avoid that, inherit those things. And finally, Vernon, also make sure you connect them with people. What are your systems of people that you've been working with, your connections, your financial advisor? Have you introduced your children to your financial advisor? Do they work with your lawyer? Do they know these people? Not that when they walk into the world, do they know your private banker? If you've got private banking, do you work with the banker? Who are the service providers and connections and people who understand the people to follow? Have you then given your children to then inherit that? So the 5 components of a good wealth transfer is in this order: culture, character, cause, cash, connections. Make sure you give your children all of those. If you give them only cash, I promise you, you're going to be a casualty. But if you give them the 5, you're protecting the cash and they're going to grow it and make sure your family improves. And therefore, your legacy will improve and stay alive with it. But once they spend your money, once your kids finish spending your money, your legacy is dead. You don't exist. You didn't exist anymore. Once the people you leave money to have finished your money, you no longer exist, except for maybe the tombstone where you are. That's the reality. So if you want to preserve that, you've got to make sure you do proper succession planning for your money as well. Those are 5 components you should be looking at. Thank you, Vernon. Thank you very much, Vernon. I rest my case.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
And have a wonderful day.